In this video, I'm going to discuss some very important and I think quite moving information regarding the Lucy Letby case with Viv Blondek. Viv was and is a highly experienced nurse and is particularly notable because she was working at the Countess of Chester at the time that Lucy was arrested. Indeed, she worked there for several decades. So, in this first clip from our discussion, she recounts what it was like at the hospital when the news first broke of Lucy's arrest.
Well, good afternoon, Chris. Yeah, a little bit about me. I started my training in Chester in 1977, and worked at the count, well, not the Countess, but the Chester hospitals and then the Countess when it was built, ever since, full time. I spent the last 22 years in coronary care unit, which I absolutely loved, doing a lot of critical care work in there in the earlier days. And then I also became a branch secretary for a trade union, Unison. And from that, I became very, very active within the hospital and the, shall we say, meeting with the executives, senior managers on a regular basis, and negotiating, consulting over terms and conditions, staffing issues. Had a lot of experience in that. Had a lot of work experience in policies, writing policies, policies and procedures, disciplinaries, sickness absentees, and you name them, I was involved in them from the trade union side. So I know a lot of the inside workings, if you like, of an NHS trust. And I really loved that side of it as well as the nursing side. But I retired in 2000, the end of 2013, and then I was in there one day because my partner had been admitted. He was in for 3 months, so I was on a daily visiting, and happened to walk in July, and there were TV cameras everywhere, and spoke to one of the staff, the security. What's going on? Can't tell you. So off I went to visit, and then I asked again, anyone going to tell me what's going on? And they said, no, we're not allowed to, which is quite right, because if anything is said, then things get put out of context. By the end of the day, that's a completely different story. So yeah, it's right at that point that you're not allowed to discuss the issues. And then I went home that night, turned the television on, and saw why the television cameras were all over the Countess. I looked at this and it wasn't sitting comfortably. It really didn't sit comfortably at all. There's something's not right here. So I put my trade union head back on, and I went then to look at the recent reports that have been done on the Countess, on the maternity services. And I found the one from Embrus that was stating there'd been 12 neonatal deaths in 2015. There was eight, I think it was eight. And in 2017, sorry, 2016, there was another, only two stillbirths, but another 7 deaths, and another two late deaths, which took it to 17 deaths in all. So something's wrong here, because we've got a big spike here in stillbirths, and that's not good. That indicates there's a problem with maternity services. If that there's a spike in that, if there's a spike within the stillbirths act is highlighting problems, then there can be problems with neonates. There'll be more babies needing neonatal care if there's a problem within the maternity services. But as time went on, I followed the case. Um, and then we get to the time where Lucy is going to court. And I decided that I will follow it right through. I still believed that there was something not right here, that it's very had every hallmark of it being a scapegoating. So I followed it day by day. And I know, granted, it's not the same as being in the courtroom, but we got a lot of information coming through on the media, um, factual stuff from the courtroom. And this was looking even worse. I was seeing areas of malpractice or suboptimal care, shall we say. And why was that not being addressed? Why was that not being picked up? And as time went on, we got to the insulin issue. And then at that point, I will say, I thought, hang on, maybe I have got it wrong. Maybe there is a problem here because it does look like they could be in the TPM bags. Then again, if you're a trade unionist, you really remember that not everything you see or hear in front of you is correct. You have to look outside. So I looked to see any other reasons why these babies would be hypoglycemic and have high incidences of insulin. And then that started to open up other areas and a lot more questions. So no, she's not even, you can't pin it down on these insulin issues. Nobody saw her do anything. And there's nothing there, nothing that puts her, I would even say, as a suspect when you look at the evidence they had. And when the actual verdicts came through, I just couldn't believe them. I mean, what I'd read and heard from the case as it went through the courts, it's just astounded me that they could come to that conviction. So yeah, I've carried on since then, supporting Lucy's innocence, and very much under the radar for a long, long time. And what was become really clear is that the nurses have become very frightened. Looking at what's happened to Lucy, particularly in ICUs, any of the critical care areas, A&E departments, the nurses are frightened now that if somebody dies on them, are they going to be the next Lucy Letby? And that is really, really scary because that will have an impact on their quality of care as well. And so this really is quite serious now that these nurses are running scared. We've seen a drop in recruitment of nurses going into training, and we've seen nurses, good quality nurses, leaving. And that isn't what is needed. We need more nurses, not less. So now we have to look at what is going on with maternity services and what happened in these cases. And the Countess isn't on its own. There's Baroness Amos is at the moment investigating 12 trusts, maternity trusts, and finding the same problems there as the Countess had. Nothing new there. But when you actually go and look at actually looked at these cases and looked at the reports from Embrus, from Royal College of Peds and the CQC, it had all the hallmarks of gross underfunding and what happens when you get gross underfunding. So this was now 5 years into the austerity, the government's austerity programme. So what happens when you've got the finances there is you start to look at ways of cutting back, and training is always one that suffers because the money isn't there any longer for ongoing training for staff. Ongoing training is vital for patient care. Equipment new equipment doesn't come because they can't afford it. They're having to work on old equipment. The old equipment is failing, but no money to replace it. So you're ending up with a workforce that then starts to get stressed and burn out. And then you've got staff going off sick. Then you've got shortages of staff. Then you're constantly dependent on agency nursing. And the problem with neonatal is that there are so very few qualified neonatal nurses. It's those on the agency, mostly general nurses. There's a shortage all round of neonatal trained nurses. And that was one of the problems that the Countess had with their vacancies, was they fill in the vacancies in the neonatal unit. They couldn't get the qualified staff to apply. So we're looking at a lot of the issues there, which basically all contribute to the perfect storm. And this is what we ended up with, the perfect storm, where things went wrong and somebody's got to be made accountable for it. And there's no one person that is responsible for what happened in that unit. I say it's multifaceted. There were so many things going on that they all contributed to this poor standard of care that cost these babies their lives. Also, one question I have to keep asking is, why do they hold on to some of these babies that should have been out in level 3 care? They seem to hold on to them far too long, and why they were not getting them out so quickly.
Yeah, so that's an absolutely fascinating way to begin the interview. There's so many follow-up questions that I could ask you. It's interesting for me to hear about someone who was there at the time, and you went home and heard about it on the news and so forth. I mean, that must have been quite emotional, was it?
It was because I'd worked there for so long. I didn't have any members over in the women's and children's, but I knew about the issues they had there. Well, a lot of the issues they had there. Never met Lucy, but she's a colleague. She was one of the staff. And, you know, having spent all those years defending staff or fighting for staff, for better working conditions, better pay. When you get better working conditions for the staff, that always has a massive impact on the patients. And I can honestly say that everyone that worked there wanted the best for those patients and would get very, very frustrated if they couldn't deliver the highest standard that they wanted to give and have been trained to give. And to see, what happened with the Countess, with the morale at rock bottom, it was so sad. And having the Countess criticised so badly as it was, I felt unfair in the fact that they were one of so many hospitals. On the Embrus report that year, the Countess was one of 22, 23 trusts who had been identified as having raised stillbirths and neonatal deaths. They weren't even in the top 10. So, they weren't, in comparison, they weren't that bad. But every death is bad, and we need to know why and what we can do to prevent things happening. And so, yes, we do need to look at it, but it just feels that the Countess has become the punch bag for the NHS maternity services, and I think that's quite sad. I think we've got to remember that the staff that work there do their best, and they've been badly criticised, and I really think that's unfair.
So I think of all the parts that I've recorded for the channel, that is definitely one of the most memorable. It was quite almost surreal to hear about just people going to what was a normal day at work and then hearing that a colleague had been arrested in these circumstances that we now know to be so wrong, in this situation and scenario that's become a pretty central part of my life. And it could have obviously passed me by very easily. And you think about how different the things could have been for Lucy. So I think it was very, very moving, very touching to hear that account. Kind of chilling, kind of surreal. In this second clip from my discussion with Viv, we go on to talk about Child K and Dr. Ravi Jayaram and some of the issues related to that.
Let's talk a bit about Jayaram and Child K. So I know that you're quite critical of this process and what Lucy's been convicted on for Child K. Do you want to walk us through that and explain why?
Well, yeah, I went to court case. I was there most days.
Did you go to the trial and the retrial?
It was the retrial. Didn't do the trial, did the retrial. And I sat there for most of it. I didn't go for the last day because by this time I was so distraught by what I was seeing in that courtroom. I couldn't stand to listen to the closing speeches because I was so angry with what I was, the way things were going. For me personally, what I saw was nothing short of major bullying of Lucy. The way she was spoken about, the way she had fingers pointed at her, and the way the whole case was conducted was totally unreasonable, in my opinion. This was a retrial, and the prosecution were allowed to name all those babies and refer to her constantly throughout that trial as a murderer.
And can I just emphasize, because I have spoken to someone else who attended the whole retrial who made this exact point. She described it as relentless.
It was relentless. It was. It was the same as the main trial. It was relentless right through the main trial. But having sat in the courtroom and seen it, experienced it, I was horrified. And why is anyone allowed to do this to somebody? Innocent till proved guilty has always been the ethos here on British justice. This poor girl was guilty before proven innocent from the moment she was charged. And she hadn't got a chance because public media did the trial of the convictions and even gave their punishment, which wasn't nice, before she'd even got into court first time, which is unfair and should never have happened. So things need to be changed to protect people, guilty or innocent. They until they're proven guilty, they should have that same protection. The court case itself, listening to the registrar, then it was the consultant from Arrow Park that took over the care of baby K. And then it was Jayaram. I was just shocked at the way that was, that they conducted. The consultant from Arrow Park came in early because he had other commitments, and that was the only time he could come. I thought he was defence witness because he went straight to Ben Myers to be questioned, and his answers, I thought, were in Lucy's defence. And everything that he said, he spoke really well. Yes and no answers, no waffle, and straight to the point. And everything he was asked, he was able to answer clearly, precisely. And from the answers he gave, I could verify when the next charts went up on put the tiles up, the next charts went up. I would go onto those charts because nursing eyes, you can read them, you know what you're looking for. I knew exactly what I wanted to know, where to find it. Chart come up, I'd look at it. Oh, right, that's quite right. He's right. And that clarified the point. There was a major issue on her respiratory state. Then Jayaram came in the following day, and I was there for the entire day. And it was just waffle. And certain comments he made, you could hear the short, sharp intake of breath from all the nurses sitting where we were in the observation room, going, no. Comments he made, we got to think, did he know what he was doing? Why is he holding on to this baby so long? I've got a lot of questions I'd like to ask as to why that baby was held in there and not fast tracked out to Arrow Park. But yeah, I wasn't impressed. I was impressed with the consultant from Arrow Park, but certainly not from the two on duty that night. And I don't think that they could clearly answer any of the questions put before them.
Can we talk about the Caroline Oakley and Lucy identity issue as well?
Oh, they're very similar build. There is a similarity, and with the lights down at night, I could easily mistake one for the other, I would imagine. I'm a bit miffed as to why they didn't bring Cadel Oakley into the court for baby K, because she was the shift leader that night. And she will have been in the same room with Joe Williams and baby K. So why she was never brought in as a witness, she should have been, in my opinion, because she was the shift leader and she could answer a lot more questions. What we found out was the change in the swipe data. Data have been put to the first court as swiping out of the unit. Well, you don't swipe out of the units. You don't swipe out of the wards. You swipe to get in, and you let yourself out by pressing a button on the wall. And so when it came to the retrial, they agreed that the swipe data was wrong and people were appearing into the unit when previously they'd been out of the unit. And it put a completely different a different picture of where people were at the time. And so when you looked at the swipe data and the charts that were, that within that time, and the notes that were made within that time scale, from 3:40 till 3:50, you've got a 10-minute timeline. And within that timeline, 3:40 was when Caroline Oakley returned to the unit. Caroline Oakley was working in room 1 with Joe. That is the point when Joe will have handed over and then gone to speak to the relatives. Lucy was busy in room 2, opposite the nurse's station where Jayaram was sat on the phone. Joe's witness statements never altered. She always said that the alarms were going when she came back in that unit. She would never have left that unit and left that room 1 empty with 3 nurses, within 3 babies in there, particularly the new one that just been admitted. So when Joe when Caroline Oakley came back, that was her time to go and update the relatives. So 3:41, we know that the transport team phoned to speak to Jayaram, and Jayaram admitted he was on the phone to them at 3:41. And Lucy was dealing with her babies as per the notes and charts from her night shift for there. So if Lucy had gone, it would have been because the alarms were going. There was no need for her to be in there if Caroline Oakley was. So she will have gone to answer alarms and to see if you needed help. And according to a email from Dr. Jayaram, much earlier on, he states that Lucy came and got him and said the baby was desaturating, which is completely different to what he said in the courtroom. And that raises many, many, many more concerns. But from the timeline that from sitting there and looking at all the evidence that was there and listening to all the evidence that was being given, I would say that Lucy wasn't anywhere near that baby that time. And if the tube became dislodged, it was because it wasn't stable. It was a tiny tube and it was not stable. And I think that was the issue. And that is why you had the 94% gas leak, because it was not in the right position.
Yeah.
That was when the baby arrived. Yeah. So there's a lot to look at in that case. And what makes me so angry and really angry is what these parents have been put through. Now, in Baby K's case, they were back in court again for a second time. And nobody should be put through that. Nobody. If this had been handled in the right way from the very onset, then an investigation's done with the experienced people that needed to look into it, who weren't available or made available, then these parents wouldn't have been put through the traumas that they've been put through. And I think it's tragic, absolutely tragic. But what's even more tragic is that we believe that she's innocent. Shu Lee's team believe that there was no murders, but poor medical care, and yet they've been told differently. And I know that if it's one of my children or my baby, I would want to be certain that it was medical negligence rather than murder. There's nothing worse than knowing your child has been murdered. And I think that is something that has to be addressed, is to why were these parents put through so much and are still going through so much? Because this is going on and on until we get that truth out. And the sooner we get that truth out, and the sooner these parents can get the truth and be able to to recover from what's happened. I am livid that these parents have been put through this. Nobody ever should have been.
So it's very interesting to hear from Viv. We spoke for over 1 hour 20 minutes. So if you want to check out the whole interview, that's available on my channel. You can see the interview here that was some months ago now. I should mention as well that Viv was a founding member of 19 Nurses, the campaign group who've held several events. I've spoken at a couple of their events myself. And I know that she very passionately cares about both Lucy's case and also the hospital itself. So I hope you found that informative, and I'll be back tomorrow with more expert opinion on a different aspect of the Lucy Letby case. Until then, thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you all again soon.